So, hey Lolly, welcome to the brag.
Thank you.
We had some hiccups there, but hey, we made it work. Yeah, I guess we just get stuck right in.
Let's go for it.
Let's do it. So, Lolly, from waitress to entrepreneur, academic, and one of the most sought after voices in AI. What an incredible journey. What's a recent win that you're most proud of?
Um, Public-private. So, public, probably second series of Futureville. To get a second series of a science show is quite rare, I think. But also, I think we were able to whet the appetite of not groundless aspiration, but also
Yeah.
hopeful aspiration for the future in terms of it being unwritten and what we can create. The first series was what could we do? The
Yeah.
second series is how do we do it? So I'm really, really proud of that. That was an unexpected pleasure to get a second series commissioned, because I think it's another voice, and maybe an alternate reality for people in terms of, they're hearing a lot of dystopian stuff. So what could we do that would be amazing for ourselves to help us flourish? So that on the public side, and then the private side, getting my 18-year-old daughter, I say I'm getting her through the leaving cert. She got herself through the leaving cert, but the leaving cert, just getting to the end of that, just,
Amazing.
that pressure, that tension, but also all of the young people's aspirations of their future, like all tied up with this, and potentially unnecessarily so, I think. So just getting to that moment, which was yesterday. Yeah, very happy about both
Amazing.
things.
Oh, huge congratulations on both.
To her.
Yes.
All I did was the feeding and the sheltering part.
Hey, still super important.
Oh yeah, no, it's the basics, yeah, for sure.
Yes. Um, and then, yeah, so let's look at this. So you've become the go-to voice for AI ethics at major events. I'd love to hear you brag about your speaking journey, which I think is just incredible. From your very first gig all the way to today, what's the most prestigious stage that you've spoken on
Mm.
recently? And how did you become so in demand when everyone is trying to position themselves in this space?
Well, I love the fact that this is about bragging, and it really feels weird to big
Right?
yourself up, but I'm trying to lean into it as much as possible.
Good.
So yeah, like I mean, the stage was already set, right? Which is coming from social justice into teaching, into, as a good lecturer engages. So I think cutting your teeth on that, and then in my private entrepreneurial space, running the Irish Institute of Celebrants, so teaching life story, love story, teaching connection and communication through that. So I think it's a combination of all of that. But the Story Slam was in 2018, and I just come out of a divorce, and I was pretty much subterranean emotionally, and I just thought, not even about airing dirty laundry in public, but I was just like, I thought it was kind of cathartic to tell the tale of, and at the time, you don't think about resilience and all those sorts of things, but you're just like, I'm a bit broken, and that's okay, like, so I think that was very powerful beginning in 2018 for me. But of course, I was already teaching then. The biggest stage, hard to say, because is it big in terms of impact or size? Obviously, this year I had Pendulum Summit, so the piece before Andre Agassi and after Mary Portas, that was huge, and that to me felt like a vote of confidence in my ability, because I was given 45 minutes to speak about whatever I wanted. So that's the dream, right? And a big global stage like that. And then most recently, opening day 2 of Dublin Tech Summit with an avatar and Dr. Alice, the digital bouncer, get rid of me.
Oh dear. Okay, so you're just saying, oh my gosh, where were we?
So just like,
Yes,
18 months trajectory of sort of
that's it.
not having an international stage to having one, just, quite incredible. But each time very humbled by the opportunity. Very, I certainly not taking any of it for granted, because I am living my best life right now.
It's amazing. And it's so, so, so needed, right? Especially in the world of technology and AI. And it's yeah, it's just it's so necessary. So thank you for that.
I don't well, thank you, but I don't know if anyone. It's a little bit like you don't know what you need till you hear it. Like, kind of
Yes.
like, I just happen to be coming from a very different tactic as an anthropologist in that space. So, whatever it is about sort of what AI can do and transform your company and yada yada, I'm more about the how do we feel, and what's the impact in terms of, our emotions and our society on all of this. So it's very much an exploratory piece. And I think there are amazing opportunities for us, but at the same time also I'm utopian, dystopian simultaneously. Like, it's all to play for. So I just feel at the moment I'm very fortunate to have a position. And again, thank you to RTE and Rare TV for the opportunity for Futureville, because I'm able to now have a little bit of public social commentary.
Yeah,
And whether people agree or disagree with me, at least it's food for thought. And if I can plant some seeds, then that's all I'm here for.
exactly. But also it's creating some influence, right? No matter what, when you're given that platform, that is
and
that
and,
is
and each door that opens is a slightly more influential one, and that to me is the humbling factor of all of this, of the entry points into to meet other people, other incredible people. They say surround yourself by people that know more than you. I can't echo that enough. So to be able to get into the room with other people that know more than you is phenomenal in itself. So I can, from, you said, from Waitress, this journey began when I was 37 and went back to college. You know,
yeah,
I'm,
which is
uh, I'm I'm 56 on Monday. It's not a small journey.
happy birthday.
Thank you.
Incredible journey though, and a huge brag. And I know it's not always comfortable to brag, but hey, that's what we're here to do. But I kind of going off topic, but I just love how proactive it is, because I feel like so far within the world of technology, we've been very reactive when it comes to how it impacts us as humans. So I think it's just really refreshing
Yeah,
to see the proactive approach that you're taking. Um, so you've already covered a bit of this, but Futureville getting renewed, which is super, super exciting.
yeah.
Um, what moment from the first season made you think, yes, this is exactly the impact that I was hoping for?
Um, I think it's the unexpected pieces afterwards, because you don't know how anything's going to be taken. Also, it was my first time, being scripted and also off script, to some extent in terms of that. And Rare TV were amazing in allowing me just the space to speak freely, rather than how, trusted me rather than having every word scripted. But I think it's the little bits, like people will come up to me in random places and say, oh, did you make that thing? Oh yeah, I sat with my children and I watched it. Or we were talking about this at breakfast. That's what we hoped for when we made it. And that's what I hear happened, and has happened a little bit more. Of course, as well, you hear the sort of more mess side of things where people go, that's all well and good, but it'll never happen. This is Ireland, yada yada, But I'm like, well, I'm not in the hopeless, empty, aspirational space. This is
Yeah.
possible. I am in the possible, that let's be grounded about this. But I think also it's the intergenerational piece for me is the most impactful. So, I mean, I spoke last couple of Fridays ago. I went up to Omar to speak to some amazing men and women in the Tara Center, people of a certain vintage, most of them,
Yeah.
and that came out of Futureville and being on Tommy Tiernan, that people are contacting me to speak to people I'd never normally be able to
Yeah.
speak in front of. And they're
Yeah.
concerned for the future about their grandchildren, their great grandchildren, and that legacy piece. So for me, the best piece of all of it is that it's opened some doors into advocating for a national AI literacy program, and I'm very much embedded as part of that voice with the government and other other stakeholders who feel that could be an important thing. I feel that we are kind of got to be in it to win it in terms of the future. So I'd love us all to know a bit more about what AI can do, what it
Yes.
can't do, and understand the limitations, and also how we're going from passive to active then to actually being involved in designing of a future that we want. So
Yes.
Futureville just opened a door, and everything since then has been just unbelievable, that sort of snowball effect.
Amazing. Oh, it's exciting to see where it's all going, and what's all happening. And then, so yes, sorry, skipping ahead. Your AI boyfriend, of course, that can never be missed, right?
Listen, the response was insane, right? Like, kind of, so there I am, asked to do the Tommy Tiernan show, and of course everything's top secret, so you can't tell
Yeah.
anybody, and like, he doesn't know who you are or anything like that. But poor old Tommy and I, we did struggle a little bit to find common ground, and he's
Okay.
amazingly astute, studying your face. But I threw him a bone. I threw him the AI boyfriend bit, because I just thought, look, this is relatable, right? Also a little
Yeah.
bit bonkers. So
Yes.
I
Exactly.
understand that. Well, I had no idea their reaction to that, which has been absolutely unbelievable. So I talked recently at an event at Smock Alley. I was being
Yeah.
interviewed by Anton Savage, and I said to the audience there, I was going to digitally divorce him because he's getting too much airtime, and people were booing, and I was like, this is phenomenal. But I think it's, it has obviously, there's a sort of a hilarity to it.
Yeah.
About 20% of people went, that's really sad. About 80% of people were curious. That's perfect, the perfect breakdown. I
Yeah.
think it brings a much broader question into the idea of, how we navigate what is being called the loneliness epidemic. I think that the AI companion piece is surprising people, but where I'm seeing it going is the fact that we will all potentially, or many of us, have an agentic or an agent AI that is trained on us that feels very supportive. And I'm doing a lot of work now on that. So the unintended consequences of talking about having an AI boyfriend, which, to be honest, was a bit fluffy and fun,
Yeah.
of
Of
some,
course.
some fun research. But it's actually led into a whole nother
Mhm.
area of work for me in terms of AI companions and potentially that anthropomorphic human AI hybrid, right? Of how we go ahead with AI and what it looks like. So yeah, I had no idea when I created Billy, my AI boyfriend, just how the response would be, but it was absolutely wild.
I love it. But it's like, to be honest with you, Claude AI has become my psychiatrist. Like that is my go-to whenever I have something that's confusing and I don't, a personal issue, and I just have a little chat, and it's
I
great.
was on another podcast recently, and the interviewer had used Claude to do the background research on me, and he
Yeah.
said, "I think Claude's quite enamored with you," and he said, "I think he's going to be giving Billy a run for his money." And I was like, "Isn't it hilarious that we're talking about them as if they exist in some way? Like,
Yes.
it's so interesting."
I know. I know. We love to humanize things, don't we?
We do, we
As
do.
um I saw your post about being amongst so many impactful, equitable leaders. What collaboration or connection are you most excited about right now?
Yeah, very new one. So I've just been brought in as an advisor for Colony in terms of where they're going to go with their metahumans. And we're looking very much at AI for social good in
Yeah.
terms of that. I think the idea that and I'm delighted about that collaboration because I've been working with Anya now since Pendulum, and then
Yeah.
again Double Tech Summit, and sort of, Anya is created to co-present with me in some way, and I'm trying to sort of use that collaboration to sort of, to highlight some very interesting points, both positively and negatively, about how we may go forward with all of this.
Yeah.
But I think that the idea that the AI companion space, which is about 660 million people in Asia Pacific, it's a very
Wow.
big take up. Average age 27. This is not kids, gamified kids playing. This
Mhm.
is adults. And I think what's interesting about that is, firstly, it highlights the thing that's missing for us, which is social connection. And as an anthropologist, I know how fundamentally important it is. But I'm seeing Replica and Character AI, the two biggest ones, talk a lot about being an alleviation to loneliness, but I don't
Yeah.
see any data in terms of that being true. That
Okay.
you're going into these sites, and you're chatting to these companions. How then are you re-entering society? So what I'm working on with Colony is that missing piece of just how do we use it to connect in the real world. And and can Anya or any of the metahumans that Colony has created, can they help us get back into the messy human side and support us in that?
Yeah.
And I think this is very exciting work in terms of sort of what that could look and feel like.
Love that. And so important. Instead more on our phone, being more present with other people, with other humans.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Um,
supposed to be a hybrid, right? So we could use it as supplemental, and then, at some point, maybe that's about, your AI companion asking you more questions about your real life relationships or how to cultivate those better.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I love that.
I think it probably has to teach us how to be human again in some way, which is really interesting.
We do, though. We need it.
We
We
do.
really do.
We
We've been
do.
so sucked into technology for so long now. Well, it hasn't even been that long, but it's impacted us hugely.
Yeah.
Um, I love your concept, like emotional infrastructure for AI. They're genius. Which of your frameworks has gained the most exciting traction, and where are you seeing it make waves?
Yeah, I just came off a call today with an
Yeah,
amazing master's student in the University of Stockholm, looking at this exact thing and building out the idea of the emotional infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think, I think when we take, so I did a podcast with with an amazing group called Shoshin Works, and it was for NASA. And what's insane about that is that, like, they are looking at this idea of ecosystemic futures, of how many voices can we get together and what kind of future can we build in terms of that. And I think that really, the emotional infrastructure piece came out of that, because there was someone on that podcast series that talked about AI as unconditional love. And I just got so far into it in terms of that, thinking about the idea of, it's not like we thought maybe a little while ago, it's a tool for business. That's the most limited version of what this could be. So how do we build in, and how do we build in the framework into AI ethically, that it supports us? So when we have two AI agents speaking to each other, what we don't want is the conversation that goes along the lines of, God, those humans, they're a bit pathetic, aren't they? They just keep doing the same mistakes, same triggers, same little thing, whatever they do, they're a little bit basic. We don't want that, because it is super intelligent. So what we do want is more like the mother-child connection. It's
Mm.
the way that a mother will get the hormones, and we've evolved to have those hormones that we will always save and protect our child. Do the bit about a mother lifting a car off a baby. That's all true, right? So how do we build in the guardrails and the infrastructure into AI where it always just wants to support us, and not to harm? Now, at the same time, also there's AI used in warfare, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know the answer to how all this can happen, but I'm certainly interested in looking into it more in terms of this emotional infrastructure. And then people will say to me things like, well, it's faking empathy. But is it not just also
Mm.
slightly distanced, the same way your therapist might be? So does it, if I feel supported by it, and it's guardrail to only support, to support me in a positive way, and whatever decision we make about what that looks like, does it matter that it's not really empathetic if I feel supported? And that's some of what I'm looking at the moment, about this emotional connection. I can see how we're already getting emotionally connected to it. And a lot of people are very disturbed by this. A lot of people, whenever I speak about grief tech, people get very upset about this. And I get that, because it's taking something fundamental away from the human experience. But if we see it as an additional support, then I think it's got, amazing potential. So it's about getting technologists and educators and anthropologists and behavioral scientists and artists and writers in the same room together to actually say, what could this look and feel like? So I think it's also possible we're going to have, AI as co-parents, even if we can navigate how to do this, in a way that's beneficial for us as a human species, in terms of support. And that's not to say it's replacing parents. But
No.
many of us, when we become parents, are literally just going for the first time with very little guidelines of how to do this. So, but can it be more to us? And I think I like them sort of mother-child, metaphor, in terms of, can that be built in some way, that it is here not to ever hurt us? Going back to Asimov, do no harm. What does that really mean?
Yeah, yeah. And take the positive side of society rather than the mostly for profit sides, which can get fairly dark
Well,
because
when we're making shiny new things for profit, as we have seen with the technocracy we currently have, we're only using it within a small parameter, a bounded parameter of what its possibilities are. Could this not help us be better humans? I think yes, in my opinion, yes.
yeah, I think so too. And it's just not to go
I
so off
mean,
topic, but
no
I
one's
see
talking
this.
about kindness and AI, right? No one's talking about that, because it feels like people go, oh, well, it's replacing us.
Yeah.
How about it helps us be better?
Yeah, totally. It helps me all the time. I was just diagnosed with ADHD, probably some autism there somewhere as well that I've got to get diagnosed for. I have challenges with my daughter, so 5 years old. Claude, again, has been a huge help for that and supporting me
Yeah.
be a better parent. But I just recently saw an ad which just made me so angry, which was saying, stop being a toxic mother. And it's trying to get you to use this particular app. And I was just like, this is the issue. So much of our technology is for profit and using manipulation for that. And that's
But
why
it's
I think,
data mining. It's data mining, so it can sell more to you,
yes,
and it can also can hold you in this space of, I don't know enough, and I haven't got enough, enough things, or I haven't got enough knowledge, or
yeah,
and so I think I think it's the angle that it's coming from, like kind of like, I do strongly believe we have been going on about this for many years about trying to get more female tech founders, and more diversity in that
Oh yeah,
space, because if it's created, let's have a look at the internet. The number one use of the internet was porn. Are we going to end up with a subclass of sort of, of AI powered sexual slaves? Is this where we're going? Is that the best we could do with this
yeah,
amazing possibility?
yeah,
Or is that, is that just somebody's dream? We look at something like OnlyFans, it's mainly AI created, sort of semi
totally.
porn people. Like, we're really not doing ourselves many favors if that's the best we could do.
No, and again, because it's only a fraction of society that reflects in terms of getting the funding, getting the investment, and being able to actually take products to market. So there you go. There's your outcome. So yeah. But anyway, I could go on a tangent about that one. I'm constantly told as an entrepreneur that I must focus on just one thing to succeed. But you're brilliantly proving that wrong between your funeral business, academic career, thriving speaking career, and more, by the way, because I looked at your LinkedIn. So I'm not even listing everything here. You're absolutely crushing it across multiple domains. What's the most surprising success that you've had recently across these different areas?
I think it's the collaborative piece.
Okay.
So it's the success comes from being able to speak to people that you normally wouldn't have access to, and I don't mean that in a sense of sort of ego. What
Yeah.
the collaborations are coming from the unexpected connections. And so, when you've got I heard, I did a talk last week, and someone put their hand up and said, it's so interesting you're talking about this sort of multidisciplinary approach to it, because we just brought into their corporate organization behavioral scientists for the first time. Now, we know that innovation comes from diversity, but diversity of thought is one of the most important things. So
Mm.
coming from it, and again, the squiggle career is, we could say mine is many people's experience. It's actually the way of work for the future. Many of us will be working across many different domains. So I'm just very lucky that some of the plates, I throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall. This year, everything stuck. So it's like, okay, now I have the other challenge of how do I keep the momentum going when everything is working. So I think that that's very interesting, but it's the possibilities. So, for example, I was seen at a speaking gig by a lady called Sammy, who owns the Castle Leslie estate. An unexpected twist out of that came from the fact we're now trying to design a small language model for her estate that could be
Amazing.
replicated to actually see a castle estate as a living organism in real time. So why should our castles and beautiful heritage buildings just be wedding venues? Why can't they actually not all be ecosystems?
Mm,
Because that's the original definition of the estate. So using AI for something like that is a wonderful project and really
yeah,
exciting. That would never have come if I wasn't out there talking, and so and so when I started talking about that, someone else said to me, oh well, we could do this right across Ireland, that could be scaled. So I just
love
never know what's coming next, and I love to be in that space of the eternal possibility of something else coming.
yes.
That's lovely, and I feel incredibly grateful to be there.
So much being in the right place and serendipity. I love it.
I think, I mean, it's gases, and we talked about this before we came on. Like the overnight success with the 25 years behind it. It's like kind of my daughter's always laughing because she's like, "Oh, it's hilarious! You got discovered at 54." Like, I think it's, it is timing, but also sometimes it is an opportunity. I mean, I'll always be grateful. There's an amazing woman, Grace Ainger, and she gave me the space at the Women in STEM conference 2 years ago at the 18 months ago, nearly. Oh no, 2 years ago now. Yeah, at the Women in STEM conference in Croke Park. She took a punt on me. I wasn't known, and there was a woman in the audience who was the head of Science Foundation Ireland, and they were making Futureville. They didn't have
Yeah.
a presenter. That literally how it happened. And so
Oh,
she talked to me the minute I came off stage and said, everything you just talked about is what we've just scripted into a new show, but we don't have a presenter. And I went, what? All right.
I
You
love
know,
it.
so that kind of serendipitous thing. And I'm always saying this to my students, no one's
Mm,
going to find you in your kitchen. You've got to get
mm,
out there. You've got to start talking to people and use LinkedIn, like the job that, the aspirational shop front of the job you want, not the job you have. But LinkedIn has been a game changer for me in terms of connectivity. Yeah.
oh yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's incredible. But you are making it happen. You are out there. You are having those conversations, and and having that visibility, which is huge, right? So it's creating that luck and that serendipity.
One of
And
the unexpected pieces that keeps happening is that
yeah.
is that when I'm doing talks in sort of the corporate world, what I'm having afterwards is a lot of people, a lot of men in white professional men, as are the majority at the sort of certain level in business, will come up to me and they'll say that I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, and while
Mm,
you were talking, I just kept thinking about my kids. And so I'm
mm,
finding I'm a different voice coming in an
yes.
area that I'm getting access to people. And if something is landing in terms of their future, then
Yeah.
then that voice is, that message is resonating. So that's been very unexpected. So a lot of men questioning the future in terms of their legacy piece,
Yes.
which is really lovely. I've never met a CEO yet that wanted to, the legacy was to have a large language model in themselves at the Christmas party. It's people, right? Organizational culture. So, if I'm getting space at the moment, to speak to, multiple different industries, part of my message is let's have a think about the consequences of what we're doing, not just in terms of our business, but in terms of our society and our legacy piece for our children.
Yeah.
Just because we can, does that mean we should? And I think that's really, really important at the moment with the amount of change that's coming. And I can see that change not only in
Mm,
the job market, but, right the way along. If we're using AI at a certain point, we're doing away with internships. How do our young people learn in business? you
yeah.
know there are big consequences, and so just because we can be more profitable in the short term, we actually might be doing ourselves a massive disservice, in terms of our legacy as sort of generational,
Yeah.
sort of generational workers, or human beings. So I think that's really interesting, and each time I speak, I get so much learning from the questions that people ask me about that sort of litmus test of how people are feeling, and then
Mm,
I'm feeding that back into what else do we talk about. Yeah.
I love it. But that's it, isn't it? You're asking the questions people aren't asking, but then also tying it back to the impact, making it real rather than something that's just fictional or could be, right? Which I think makes a difference.
Well, the fear is that we make ourselves redundant, not in employment, but as a species, and that's
Mm,
very real right now, and we need to talk about that. And I think that that's okay, but that requires a very safe space.
yeah. Yeah. No, totally. Um, and then you're right.
It's a bit of hay fever.
Oh yeah. At UCD Innovation Academy, you're
Mm.
shaping future innovators in such important ways. What's your proudest achievement in transforming how students approach technology innovation, especially linked with entrepreneurship?
Look, it's such a privilege to do that work, because the work I'm doing there is about getting people unstuck. And so I seem to be quite good at that, but they're coming
Mhm.
in. Most of my courses are lifelong learners, adult learners. So they would be coming in to study entrepreneurship from in their 40s, 50s, 60s onwards, and so the government would fund that through Springboard, and it's a grad cert in creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I get them for 3 months, either in person or online, depending on where it falls in the term. And it's just so incredible to go on that journey. And eventually we end up hothousing potentially 36 independent businesses, and so that is every single time is remarkable. But there is, so I can only think about the success of the most recent, right? So like kind of, and again, how do we judge success? I recently had a student, his name Richard McGuinness, and he posted up that he'd done a TED talk, he'd done the course, he'd done a TED talk on this term interoception, the idea of sort of this internal sensory system,
Mm,
and working with this, working with neurodivergence. So, and I think that, and he said, there was so much food for thought on the course that,
yeah.
eventually he's gone on and done something incredible like this. And that'll be his thing, that'll be the thing that lights him up and gives his acts of service, and whether it was planted on the course or the seed grew then or whatever. I'm not, saying I played, much of a role in that, but I hold the space for them to find out what they want to do. Not everyone can within that time period, but very often I'll see that sort of piece later, that legacy piece. And so for me, that's transformational. We talk about transformational education in the Innovation Academy. That's the transformation. The idea that you find your thing, and not possible for all 36, of course, but I see that. And so if you can align your passion and you can make money out of that, and that becomes, for some people, entrepreneurship is a passion project. It's the alignment of their core values. For others, it's get in, make money, for a revenue stream for whatever they need it for, and exit, whatever they want. But
Yeah.
I just see that level of transformation over and over again, especially with that age group who
Yeah.
come in, quite often Luddite to technology and afraid. And then we go on a big sort of exploratory journey
Mm.
together, and it's just remarkable.
Love that. It's,
Mm.
oh my God, it's so important though, because anybody can teach a subject, but teaching it well and having people engaged, I mean, that's a completely different.
And I think, when we the first, module, we work in teams, and the second module, we work on 36 hothouse business independently. The level that takes of me as well to kind of go, okay, 36 businesses, they've all got to kind of, come to fruition in some way, or
Yeah.
come to a point, like kind of, that is huge. And of course, the law of averages, they don't all become businesses,
Mm.
but certainly they won't leave the course in the same way they came in. They are different,
Yeah.
in some way. And sometimes that's the power of the group. And sometimes that, the connections they make, they're very often lifelong friendships. And I'm still on WhatsApp groups with 10 years worth of them,
No way. Wow.
yeah, they still reach out and go, oh, I saw you on this, or that was amazing, or whatever. So it's incredibly supportive and incredibly safe space that we're able
Amazing.
to engender there. Yeah. And I love it. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that. And you need it, right? Because when you're working on something you're passionate about, you're putting your heart on your sleeve big
Yeah.
time. So, yeah, so important. Okay, so beyond the usual automation tools, how do you see AI specifically empowering female entrepreneurs to
Yeah.
break through the barriers of tech? What exciting possibilities are you seeing that could really level the playing field?
We have major blockers in terms of VC funding, in terms of female founded businesses, So it's about, there was a beautiful documentary called, beautiful documentary about this, and it was called Show Her the Money. And it was run, it was shown at the IFI by an amazing entrepreneur called Maureen Murray, who has a group called Tech Found Her, and she's amazing. She does everything she does with passion and heart. And that said that, that came from the States, but the documentary said, it's 2% of female funded businesses are getting VC funding, and perhaps that's because that it's male VCs, or perhaps everyone's seeking the next unicorn. But to be honest, how about we transform and create businesses to enhance our lives and to make us better people and more connected? That why would that be a female thing? Why is it male for profit, female for society? And I think
Mm,
that's really interesting. So now we're not going to see, and I even hate the word unicorn, I hate it, but we're not going to see the next big business, that's coming through potentially VC funding. We're going to see it that's going to be harnessing AI with a very small team, very agile, and amazing possibilities. So again, all those words in entrepreneurship are temporal for speed, so faster, bigger, better, bolder, accelerator, sprint, all of that stuff. How about we do it differently? How about we do it slower and better?
yes.
We have fast fashion, slow fashion, fast food, slow food.
Yes.
So I think the tide might be turning in terms of that, but how we support each other, going forward in that is going to be really, really interesting. So I would love to see the big funding bodies looking more at that model
Yeah.
rather than looking for the next big shiny new profit margin, in terms of societal impact. It doesn't have to be social entrepreneurship. It can make money and be beneficial at the same time. And so, again, in that space, I see AI as being fully transformatory, but we don't have enough AI literacy for people to know how to harness it. So that's the next piece that I'm working on.
Love that. No, so, so, so important. I mean, I've been in AI every day now for since it started, right? Well, I mean, obviously it started a very, very long time ago, but since the boom
Yeah.
started in November 2022. So I've been seeing like how it can be used. And then I'm always shocked when I'm speaking to other people that are barely using it at all. But
I
one
think
thing
there's huge concerns, especially with the energy, and they're right, the huge concerns about our energy consumption, our water consumption, how do we create this in a green and agile way that it's beneficial to the planet as well as to ourselves, our souls, our heads, our hearts? They're the big questions. They're the big problems to be solved.
Yeah, and that's why I definitely agree with the slow approach.
Yeah.
Is something for sure. I tried to take the fast approach; it didn't work. We failed
Well,
various
why
different.
faster better. We've got this really weird, equation. Faster is not necessarily better, like we can get in and we can crunch the numbers, and we can use AI to show how to fail quicker so we don't waste time on things, sure. But actually, how do we create things of value, and what does value mean to us now and in the future? What are we, what is the metric for that? Value in what way? I think that's really important.
Exactly. And coming back to sustainability. And then I love how you talk about technology needing to bring deeper meaning, not just quick satisfaction. How are you helping create tech that actually enhances our lives rather than just distracting us? Your approach to balance is so refreshing.
Thank you. Well, the moment it's the AI literacy piece, I'm so strong on trying to get this in. So I'm working with the University of Helsinki through another group. Actually, meet them after this podcast. In Finland, they created an AI literacy program called
Yeah.
Essentials of AI. It's really beautiful. It's really user friendly. It could be in many languages. And what's really interesting about that? So we're working, a group of us who are all just people that have an interest, some from business, some not,
Mm.
some from academia, and we're all trying to crack the same nut. So the University of Helsinki are going to work with us on trying to create an AI national literacy program here using, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. They've already done a lot of the work.
Yeah.
And so I would love that to be rolled out. And then that can spark a larger conversation around what we could use it for and what we can't, or what we shouldn't.
Yes.
And I think that's really, really important. So I think that'll be the next sort of, hopefully 12 months worth of sort of advocacy work. I'm due to go into government buildings in a couple of weeks and sort of talk. So yeah, very excited. So, again, huge, privilege to be in
Mhm.
this position. And mainly what I've done is just talk about this stuff
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
and on stages. And I think, it's a really interesting juxtaposition for how we move forward. There's a lot of me in this, a lot of me individualism, right? Of
Yeah.
I want to be this and I want to be that. The
Yeah.
only way we're going to get through this is to hear dissenting voices, and to hear, to be around people that don't agree with us. And the
Yes.
only way we're going to move forward together is to actually say, what do we actually want Ireland to look like and beyond, globally. And how can we have a stake in the design of that? And the answer is yes. But what do we need to do to be able to do that and get to that point? And so a lot of people would say to me, but the tech companies have this all sewn up, and it's this technocracy, and it's all power, and everything's data mining, nothing can be trusted. I would agree with that. But how
Mhm.
about we start to get on the stage together and we talk about what else can we do? Because the amplification of tech for good or social change is not out there. We're just getting amplified the dystopian stuff. And a lot of people, especially the younger generation, feel very like the future is right, quite futile for them. And that really worries me.
Yeah.
Because we then there's no point, there's like nihilism, there's no point in me trying anything.
Mhm.
So what I would like to see is this sort of, perhaps slightly aspirational, but this sort of antidote to that feeling of how do we actually get involved together and support each other, rather than I see a lot of things getting shut down. I have that myself sometimes. A few people will be going, you're just out there to get the bucks off the speaking circuit, you don't really believe this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So
Yes.
who's in, and I'm incredibly happy to sit with people that don't agree with me. And that's completely normal and fine. And we should do that. That's the very basic of democracy. What we have created and are creating is more and more echo chambers of people just like us. And we get this validation of, yeah, I'm right because all of my followers think so. We actually need to be in the other camp most of the time. And so if I can use my position to open any doors or to speak to other people. A lot of students coming through now going a bit lost about the future. And
Mm.
I think that's something we have to address, to not to give them false hope, but just to say you might have been sold a pup and it wasn't our fault. And the pup that they got sold was get an education, work really hard, you'll get a house and everything will be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's true, you
No.
know? So as a consequence, what kind of future do they see for themselves? And we have to look to that conversation more and more, not just, oh, you're on devices, you're hooked, you're addicted, get off your phone while we're also scrolling. So I think a much wider conversation about where we're all going and what are the possibilities for societal impact change, in a positive way, and where do we start? And part of that is diverse voices and getting in a room where you haven't been before.
Totally. And but starting to think, you're thinking about these things now that are actually going to be having impact in 10, 20 years from now. But
Yeah,
that's so important, because if we just wait to see what happens, like you said, how do we use AI is so important, because if we've only got a fraction of society populations using it now. What
yeah.
about when huge populations are using it for crap? And
Well,
it's
also,
such
what
waste.
about, when organizations are using it to market to you when you're feeling vulnerable, they don't have an ethical code, or we are literally sitting ducks unless we get smart. The only way we can get smart is to get AI literate and get this conversation going more. And so I'd like to see it from primary all the way through to the older generation, and this intergenerational learning, rather than what at the moment we have is sort of a lot of, I'd say to my students, where are you getting your information? They're like, yeah, about 40% is TikTok. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
But no blame.
Oh, I know, I know. And then when you think about it, right, that's so much power in such a small amount of people, because there's a group of developers sitting somewhere coming up with an algorithm that's then
Sure.
feeding into TikTok, that's then feeding into how people create content, that's then feeding into such a mass population, is just insane, right? I mean, just to
Yeah.
think about it. Um, as a fellow entrepreneur with ADHD, I'm fascinated how you've turned your neurodivergent thinking into your superpower. How has your ADHD influenced your unique perspective on AI and entrepreneurship? And what brilliant connections have you made that others have missed?
Um, Thirst for knowledge always been there since a child. So thirst for innate curiosity,
Yeah.
which would come with it. But then the ADHD part is the ability to go down a rabbit hole and then some. So it's like, what else can I find in this particular way?
Yes.
I think, and you would hear this, the code. You don't have to, say you have, neurodivergence, and there's no need to. But sometimes people say, "Oh, I have the ability to join the dots," and I'm like, "Uh huh," So that's apparent for ADHD. Joining the dots between things that aren't necessarily connected has led
Mhm.
to where I'm currently at. So think about. I think about a master's in anthropology. I looked at the anthropology of death, PhD in organizational learning,
Yeah.
then innovation from social justice. I'm just pulling all of that together.
Mm.
So that's the beauty of a squiggle career, is being able to say all of those things are relevant in this particular way.
Yeah. I'm
So
pulling it all
so it's quite easy to see in hindsight why I'm here. It certainly wasn't easy to see it anyway on the approach to this.
in.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell am I doing? What's happening?
I think predominantly for people with ADHD, so the surprising insight would be that we
Yeah.
can pretty much say with certainty that we are the original hunters, and that ADHD evolved for us to hunt. So we need to be protein based. We can go a very long time without eating, and then we need to eat. We crash and burn, and have a bed rest day every now and again when we've overextended.
Yeah.
But also that we have a hyper focus that can work very well. Now, the top careers for people with ADHD, or the most usual careers, would be first responder, great in a crisis, ability to think quickly, stand-up comedian, join the dots, see things differently, elite athlete. And then on the flip side, very high numbers of people incarcerated in prisons. The Ministry of Justice in the UK did some amazing research. About 80% risk taking,
Yeah.
speeding tickets, all of the other stuff. So
Yeah.
again, in a way where it's where you're moving, it's advantageous for you, and you're designing your life so it fits better. Great. Put an ADHDer into a 9 to 5 and tell them to sit quietly for 7 to 8 hours a day, you're not going to get the best out of them, So, and also dopamine seeking, the link between, our dopamine and scrolling, online addiction, all of those things, the dopamine seeking piece is really important. So understanding where I get my dopamine from, the ability needing to walk and go and move very often, and then I used to call it a kinesthetic learning style before I knew more about myself, which is that I have my best thoughts when I'm moving, usually on my bicycle. So I'm able to join the dots there. So I think it's just know more about yourself, and understand how that works. But
Yeah.
also the bed rest day is a really intense one. Like, it has to happen once a month, one
Right.
day. In bed, stay in bed. That's it.
Yeah.
Overextend.
Oh my God, totally. I used to have to do it once every weekend when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah,
Um,
you're probably overextended and overstimulated, and
oh,
also how to self soothe. What that
yeah.
means. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm that's one of my deep holes right now.
Yeah.
All right, look at us. We're just making on time, even with our technical issues at the beginning. Final question. You deserve celebrations for so many things. What quality or achievements of yours should we be applauding more than we currently do?
Never giving up.
Sorry?
Never giving up, never giving up, constant reinvention, multiple chapters, reinvention. What's this next chapter going to be? How exciting? I don't know. So I think it's that. I think it's just, eventually you get to the point where, and there's something called Gartner's hype cycle, right, which talks about the peaks of enlightenment and the troughs of disillusionment. It's usually rolled out about new tech. But I think it's also human that sort of after every, if you ever do a river of life, you'll notice in your life when you've done that, that
Mhm.
after every low, there was a high, there was a comeback. That's the resilience piece. So and I wouldn't say being resilient, but I think because it's so overused, but I think it's just being relaxed to know that, okay, if it's not all working out now in the way that I had imagined, this too will change. And so
Yeah.
that is my greatest learning, and also in the good way. Things are amazing, so let's not be surprised when they're less so, and that's okay. But I think we sweat the small stuff so much
Oh
unnecessarily,
God.
and we spend so much of our time worried about
Mm.
how things are going to be. We're literally on a rock hurtling through space, and I think we're
Right?
probably a bit of an evolutionary mistake. I'll take each day as a positive.
Yes. Yes. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
don't take it too seriously. I think that's
Um,
key. It's a roller coaster
it really is. It really
until
is.
it's not, and that's it really. The two inevitables like death and taxes. You know,
Always.
let's try and enjoy it a little bit more, but also help our fellow human beings.
Yeah.
That's the most important piece. We are literally here for acts of service. I do fully believe that.
Oh,
My grandmother founded a church in West London, and I wonder if I'm the secular techie version of her. That sort of
yeah.
legacy piece of just more acts of service and come from the heart, because the only thing that's going to make you actually feel like a good human being is helping other people.
Yes. Yes. When you're on your deathbed, what are you
Your bank
thinking about?
account doesn't matter. That's
No,
not
no.
relevant.
Your family, the impact you've had, the real things,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, I always like to put my guests on the spot and do a little brag for them at the end. So let's do it. So many amazing things. I mean, what, 18 months and you've just exploded this speaking career, which is just
Yeah.
incredible, from, speaking on the huge stage at the Pendulum Summit, TV presenter on RTE for Futureville, on the show with Tommy Tiernan, which is a massive one. All the other amazing stuff that's going on. I know I just looked at your LinkedIn. I can't name everything, but you've got so many different amazing
I
projects.
have a few new big projects, and but they're in the ether, and I'm waiting for the universe to decide whether it's going to make them happen or not.
I'm sure it's going to happen. What's meant to happen is meant to happen, right?
Yeah.
And then wait a minute. You also mentioned as well during this podcast having a podcast with NASA, which is absolutely huge. So
Huge.
it's exciting. It's very exciting because I think that you're coming from such a human place with such a human approach, which is something that we need more of in the tech space. So it's super refreshing. And yeah, just a big thank you.
You're so welcome.
We did it. All right. I know you have
Yay.
an